my channel and welcome to this week's video. My name is Gemma and I have a 21-month-old son called Oscar, and in this week's video I'm going to talk about his transition from a cot into a bed, and particularly a floor bed. So if you are familiar with my channel and you know a little bit of what we're about, we follow the Montessori principles at home, and so I'm just going to talk about our reasons for moving Oscar into a floor bed to start the video, and then I'm going to go through some top tips that we've found have really worked and helped the transition be really smooth. And then towards the end of the video I will talk about what we did when Oscar decided to get out of his bed, because that's a big concern for us parents, I know, and you know, they're in a cot and they're sleeping really well. Why move them to a bed? And you don't want to kind of disturb the sleep pattern. So I'll just talk about our method for what we do when Oscar gets out of bed, how we made the whole thing a really smooth transition. So just to go over the reasons why we decided to move him, he transitioned into a floor bed at around 19 months, 18 and a half, 19 months. But I do feel like he could have done it a lot sooner, and in Montessori they actually advocate just moving them when you take them out of your room and you put them in their own room into a floor bed straight away, which in hindsight would actually be easier because they're just used to it. So the reasons why we chose particularly to move him into a floor bed was independence. So following Montessori principles, what we're trying to do is encourage our children to be independent, so that they don't need us to put them into a cot and they don't need to be confined in a space, that we trust them to have a space and go to sleep independently. So that was a big factor for us. He was in a cot in Dubai up until the point we left, and then he was kind of like in travel cots between leaving Dubai and starting in Ireland in families' houses, and then while we ordered this bed and got it made, he was still in a travel cot. So the second reason for moving him was that he was growing. He was getting too big for a cot, and he was taller, he was stronger, and I just didn't feel it was safe for him to be in a cot. He was still sleeping absolutely fine. He didn't mind being squashed, which I felt that he was. So it wasn't about his sleep as such. It was a risk. And I think lots of us get put off about moving our children from cot to bed because we don't want to disturb their sleep. But I really do encourage you to take that step, because it really does improve your child's independence. And the final reason why we decided to move Oscar was that we were beginning to feel that Oscar was becoming capable of potty training, and in order for him to be potty trained for day and night, he was going to need to be able to get out of his bed and go to the potty. So that was a big factor, that to encourage his independence with potty training, that he would need to be able to do that. Okay, so these are now the 5 tips that really helped us to make that transition a smooth process and successful. So before we even started to, you know, put Oscar in the bed, I did a lot of research and I looked up lots of websites and tips and blogs and watched loads of YouTube videos, and kind of came up with what I felt would work for Oscar, knowing him. And I want this video for you to understand that this is what worked for my child, and it's obviously not going to work for all children. So I'm going to give you my 5 top tips, but if you feel like that wouldn't work for your child, of course, don't do it. So I did, I did a lot of research, and there was 2 things that kept popping up that I just didn't feel fit well with me, Oscar, our family. One of them was there was lots of talk about making the transition a big fun experience and throwing a big bed party and you know, really like fanfares and clapping and wow, isn't this going to be exciting? I just didn't feel that was the way to go. I wanted this to be normal, that this was just what was happening, that we sleep in beds, and I just didn't feel making, you know, our children pick up on us, on our emotions and what we're saying so much, more than we even realise. They understand our body language without us even having to say anything, and I just felt that Oscar would pick up on that as being odd. We don't make a fanfare about too many things. You know, we seek that Oscar has his own pride and things, and you know, we don't overpraise. So to create a big fanfare about him moving to his bed just didn't fit with us. And the second one that didn't fit was calling it a big boy bed or a big girl bed. Lots of people in these tips and tricks videos or blog posts that I was reading was saying about, before you move them, to start talking about how they're a big boy or a big girl. And I just felt that's pressure. Because he's not a big boy. He doesn't even understand what that means. He's my only child, so it's not like he's got an older sibling to compare himself to. He just doesn't understand that language. It's just odd. He knows that we sleep in a bed, and what I did instead was, when we were reading stories and there was a bed in it, so I don't know, Where the Wild Things Are is a good one. Max is sent to his room and there's a bed in there, and I just kept pointing out beds, not saying that it was a big boy bed. I just felt that was such pressure to put on our children, that not only are you going to move into a bed, but you're also going to be a big boy. So that just didn't fit well with me. Obviously, if you feel that that does work with your child, go ahead. I just didn't feel that it was necessary. I just wanted this to be normal, that this was just what was happening, and this is where we're going to sleep from now on. So my first tip is to have your child involved in the process of making the bed. So more likely than not, you're actually going to purchase a bed for this process. We chose a floor bed because it is safer for this process, that your child is not too far from the ground. I know there is cots that transition into toddler beds, but it tends to mean that they're still quite high up, so that's not what we wanted, because he could then fall out. And so Oscar was involved in the making of the bed. I'll insert some footage. So he absolutely loves to be involved in DIY. He likes the tools, the screws, and so he was just involved in preparing his room. So when we decided to make over his room, he was just there and involved, and that really helped him to become accustomed to what the changes that were happening in his room, to see the bed being built. That it wasn't just going to be this thing that he walked into the room and, oh look, suddenly here's your big boy bed. He was just involved in it. He just saw the process happening, and obviously through it took a while, like over a week, for this to happen. I just kept reading him books, picking out beds, but not like abnormally, just if they happened to be there, and just got him comfortable with the fact that this was a bed, learning the language of bed rather than cot, and understanding that that's where he's going to sleep. My second tip is not to confuse the situation. Again, when I was doing my research, there was lots of conflicting points about whether to have your child sleep in their cot in the room with the bed, so to have a cot in here as well, and so that he's sleeping in his cot but he's seeing the bed. I just felt that was really confusing. Like, okay, so I was involved in making the bed, I've seen it be put in my room, but I'm still going to sleep in my cot and I'm just going to stare at it. That just didn't feel right to me. And then they kind of say, and then you move them out, move the cot out. Oh no, then you put them in the bed but leave the cot in the room. For me, that just felt confused. I'd be confused if I was Oscar. So what we did was, Oscar was sleeping in the spare room in his cot, and his cot never came in this room. I know that's personal to us, because obviously we've moved house, and if your child has been in a cot in that room and then there's going to be a bed, that's different for you. So for us, Oscar just didn't sleep in a cot in this room, and then he then moved into this bed. Simple and less confusing was that I started with Oscar going for his nap in the bed, because I always feel that Oscar is more tired for his daytime nap than his going to bed in the evening. He's a bit more alert. Like, it takes him about half an hour to fall asleep at night time, but for his nap he kind of falls asleep within a few minutes. So I decided to start him with his nap. After that was successful, I just continued with that, and Oscar went to sleep in here for night time, and that was him. That's been him ever since. He's never gone back into his cot. Okay, my third piece of advice, and this was in everybody's tips and that I do agree with, is that you need to make the space safe. Obviously they're going to be able to get out of this bed at any point. Yes, you can watch them on a monitor, but when you go to sleep at night, you're not going to be able to watch them through the night. So you have to make the space safe. That includes all the gaps down the sides of the bed. So some people opt to put the guardrails up. We actually didn't choose to do that. As you can see, I've just put, they're quite large pillows down the gap between the bed and the wall. It's actually a very small gap, but actually that can be worse, because they can get stuck in that gap and not be able to get out. So you need to factor in any gaps, and also factor in the possibility that they're going to roll out of the bed. And I know that's a huge concern for us parents, and that's why a lot of people put the guardrail up or buy the bed with the kind of built-in guardrail. Again, I didn't choose to do that, and I kind of explained why in my room tour video. And instead we did the towel trick, which I will show you now. What I've done is, so here's the sheet, and we've got a mattress protector as well, and I've just rolled up, I've just laid 3 beach towels on top of each other, and then rolled it into a big long sausage, and then stuck it under the mattress protector and the fitted sheet. So there's like this, you can do it with a pool noodle, but I didn't want to go buy a pool noodle for this purpose. So it's just as a little buffer, so when he's there, so it's, because it's kind of almost his thickness, it will stop him hopefully rolling out onto the floor, but he'll still be able to get up and over it himself. And obviously you need to make the space around the bed safe, so making sure that plug sockets, if you've got curtains with rope ties or anything like that, any kind of wires to plugs for monitors and things like that are all tacked in. I did go over all of these kind of things in my room tour video, as I said, but you just need to make sure that there is nothing in that room that is going to cause them any harm, or that they can you know, put into a plug socket or anything like that. Another aspect of safety that you need to consider is how your child sleeps currently and how they're going to sleep in their bed, insofar as when Oscar was in a cot, he was in a sleeping bag, a zip up, no feet out kind of sleeping bag, and obviously that's not going to be safe in a floor bed. They need to be able to use their legs to get in and out, or if they fall out, you know, they need to be able to have their legs out. But there obviously is also the concern that they're not going to be able to keep a duvet on because they're not used to that, and so they'll get cold. So what I did was a good few months before Oscar transitioned to his bed, I purchased a sleeping bag that has arms and legs. It was from Jojo Mama, and I'll link it in the description box below. It was beautiful. If only they made them an adult size, but it meant that he got used to the fact that his feet were out before he moved into this bed, because I think that's a weird transition for them as well, having kind of always slept with their feet in a little sleeping bag, to then have their feet out was a bit different. So I made sure that transition happened before this. I know there's probably questions about when do you introduce the duvet and the pillow. We did it right from the start, so that it wasn't then going to be another transition to then have a pillow and a duvet. But what we did was the pillow was at the top. We kind of half folded down the duvet, so he had quite a big space of sheet available to him. And he was still in that sleeping bag, so I knew that he was warm, he didn't need the duvet. And then just over time, he started to get used to sleeping on the pillow, and he actually loves having a pillow now. Just to note that you need to pick a firm pillow, so that there's no risk of suffocation. If it's a big fluffy pillow and they've got their face in it, there's a risk there, so make sure that it's a fairly firm pillow. We chose single size pillow and duvet, not toddler size, because obviously we went for a single size bed, and that's been absolutely fine. And now he's, like I say, 3 months into sleeping in the bed, and he pulls up the duvet now and he sleeps on the pillow. Through the night the duvet gets kicked off or whatever, but obviously if he wakes up and he feels cold, he knows to pull up the duvet. So that kind of just transitioned, and he's just learnt that himself. My fourth tip is to make sure that your routine stays the same. Of course it's going to be different because they're not going to go into a cot, they're going to go into a bed, but everything else that you used to do needs to stay the same. So bath time, reading stories, whatever it might be, needs to stay the same to keep that absolutely, you know, this is sleep time, this is what we're doing, this is what we've always done. Of course you need to make slight adjustments because of you know, where you might do story time before. Like I used to do story time sitting with him on my lap, and we used to read stories. And now what we do is, now what we do is he has a story while he sits on the potty, and then he has a story laying in bed. But when he first transitioned, I would lay him in bed and I would sit on the floor and I would read him a story while he was laying in bed. So that was a slight change, but the story time still happened, is what I mean. So whatever you used to do leading up to bedtime, just keep that the same, so that they understand that, okay, I'm still going to bed. It might just be a different place, but I'm still going to sleep. And my final tip is kind of leading on from tip 4, is to make sure that you keep everything the same and then start to phase out the things that were very much about the cot. So like I said about the sleeping bag, we kept that the same. That transitioned over into the bed. He stayed in the sleeping bag, and then once I realised he was getting used to the duvet, the sleeping bag came off and the duvet phased in. If they used to have a little blanket, bring that across to the bed. That can be exactly the same. The only change should be the bed. Try to keep everything else the same. What they wear, their routine, everything needs to be the same as much as possible. Whatever they had in their cot, keep in their bed. The only change should be the bed. Okay, so those are my top tips that have worked for us. And I'm gonna say that yes, Oscar does get out of his bed. For the first week, he would go into his bed and he would not get out, which was amazing. I was like, how am I going to make a video about my top tips about making the transition smooth when I just put him in the bed and he went to sleep and everything was fine? And then it changed. So he was, the first week was brilliant. We put him to bed for naps and bedtime. He did take a while longer to go to sleep. I think the first couple of nights he took like 2 hours to actually fall asleep, but he stayed in the bed. And then things changed because he obviously realised he could get out of the bed. I don't think the first week he realised he could. And then he decided that he would come to the door and try the door. We don't have a stair gate on his door, but we have a stair gate on the stairs just outside his door. So we actually shut his door and then the stair gate's outside. So if he was to get out, he still can't get down the stairs, kind of thing. And I think this is a really normal process for them. Of course, they start to realise they can get out. Of course, they're going to like try that out and see what that's like and see what your reaction is going to be to them getting out. And I know I had a lot of messages from people saying, oh, I'm really looking forward to this video because we tried it with our child and they got out of the bed and so we've given up. And you know, your child is constantly testing the boundaries because they want to see what they can do and what your reaction is going to be and if it's going to be the same every time. Our children are seeking boundaries. They want boundaries and we need to be consistent in order to give them to them. So Oscar gets out of the bed, he tries the door, he might cry. I am consistent in opening the door. I don't let him stand there and cry. I open the door and I say, come on, it's bedtime, and I take his hand and I take him to bed and I, tuck him back in, night night, and I leave the room, close the door again. Very often he will do exactly the same. I'll get downstairs, I look at the monitor and he's getting back out of bed. He's going to the door and he's trying it again. And the same thing, I come upstairs, I open the door, less words the next time, so just, bedtime now and get him into bed. To the point now where he knows when he comes to the door, and he's still doing this every so often, and he's 3 months in, he comes to the door, I open the door, and he actually holds his hand up waiting for me, because he knows I hold his hand and take him to the bed. He's just checking, is this consistent? Is she going to do this every time? Is she going to give up? Am I going to end up getting to go downstairs? Am I going to end up getting to go into her bed? He's just seeing, if I do this, what is going to be her reaction? Is it ever going to change? And that's what our children are always doing. They're always testing to see, is the reaction always going to be the same? And the minute it's not, that puts a little, seed in their brain that, okay, sometimes it's different. This is exciting. Sometimes if I do it, she'll do this instead. Or sometimes if I do it, it's this. Just be consistent. Yes, to begin with, it might take, 10 times of you walking them back to the bed. But you don't need to be angry about it. It's just them, trying this new system out. Just be consistent. Try to keep, the chat minimum. So it's just, okay, it's sleep time or whatever you say, sleepy time, bedtime. Just keep it consistent, put them back in the bed. It's sleep time. This is what's happening. Another question I got from my room tour was that, does Oscar ever go over to his wardrobe and start pulling things out? The answer is no, he has never done that. And I think it's because he was involved in the process of us making the wardrobe. He sees that it's a dressing area. Every day he's involved in, the dressing process. When he gets ready for bed, he is involved in that. I don't think he sees it as a toy. He knows that he kind of touches that area when he's getting dressed, and at night he's not. I haven't done anything else other than that. I just haven't made a thing of it. I you know, I don't say, now don't touch those socks over there, just don't mention it. And he doesn't. He has books in his room, he doesn't have any toys, so he has board books that he's free to, you know, look through those in the dark if he wants to. And yeah, he's just transitioned really well. It took, I would say, about 2 weeks for him to be really settled. Like I say, he had the first week of, you know, almost perfection, except for taking longer to fall asleep, and then probably another week after that of really testing that boundary of what happens when I get out of bed. And now, like I say, it happens every so often. Maybe if he's not feeling so well, he's a bit more clingy, doesn't want us to leave the room. But the consistency really has helped. So that is the end of this week's video. I really hope it has helped you feel a bit more confident about if you're thinking about transitioning your child. Like I say, my tips work for my child. They're not going to work necessarily, all those tips, for your child, but I hope that it's given you a bit of confidence to say, yeah, if I'm consistent and I follow, you know, a really smooth process and keep things really normal for my child, that this is something that they definitely can do. If you've got any questions, head over to my Instagram and send me messages over there, and I'm really happy to answer them. And I'll see you again next week. Bye.